The Battle of Wayna Daga occurred on the 21st of February 1543 east of Lake Tana in Ethiopia, led by the Emperor Gelawdewos. The combined army of Ethiopian and Portuguese troops defeated the Adil Ottoman army led by Imam Ahmad ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi. Tradition states that Ahmad was killed by a Portuguese musketeer, who had charged alone into the Muslim lines. Once the Imam's soldiers learned of his death, they fled the battlefield. Background: at the Battle of Wayna, Imam Ahmad had crushed the Portuguese expeditionary force, killing most of its men, capturing practically all of the firearms they had, and capturing and killing its leader, Cristóvão da Gama. By any reasonable assessment, the Imam enjoyed a decisive victory over his greatest foe. Armies in the Horn of Africa melted away with the death of their leaders. He then reduced the number of the mercenary Ottoman arquebusiers to 200, and relying on his own forces retired to Empraz near Lake Tana for the coming rainy season. Miguel de Castanhazo states that these arquebusiers left his service because they were upset that he beheaded da Gama, whom they wanted to present to the Ottoman emperor. However, Beckingham notes that a Hadrami chronicle states that some of them threatened the Imam's life unless he gave them 10,000 ounces of gold, to which he gave a very favorable reply. When the rest of the group learned of their success, they came to the Imam and made a similar demand, deciding that he had no further need of their services. He sent them home giving them 2,000 ounces of gold. However, Gama had inspired a fierce loyalty in his surviving followers, all but 50 of whom had reassembled after their defeat around Queen Sabla Wengel, and taken refuge at the Mountain of the Jews, which Whiteway identifies as Umbasel. De Castanhazo, writing decades after the fact, states that after the Emperor Gelawdewos had joined the survivors, and seeing the number of men who flocked to the Emperor's standard at Christmas, we went to the Prester, and begged him to help us avenge the death of Dom Cristóvão. Gelawdewos agreed to march against the Imam. The Portuguese firearms which had been stored at Debradamo were produced. A message was sent to a company of Portuguese soldiers who had proceeded to Debawa to find passage home, but they failed to respond in time for the coming battle. The Allied forces spent the following months marching the provinces before heading to Imam Ahmad's camp next to Lake Tana. On the 13th of February 1543, they defeated a group of cavalry and infantry led by the Imam's lieutenant Syed Mehmed in Wagera, killing Syed Mehmed. From the prisoners it was learned that the Imam was camped only 5 days' march away at Derazgay, and flush with victory the army marched to confront their enemy. Location: as with many of the battles in Castanhazo's narrative published 20 years after the events they describe, the exact location where the two forces encountered one another is not known. General histories of Ethiopia are vague. Paul B. Henze, in his Layers of Time, implies the battlefield was near Lake Tana, and in a footnote states that much of the combat activity at this time would seem to have been in Gaint, the former province located southeast of Lake Tana. Richard Pankhurst in the Ethiopian A History places the engagement in Western Bagemda, which covered the area corresponding to the contemporary Debub Gondar zone. Lastly, the name itself is of little help. Wayna Daga is the traditional Amharic word for the climatic regions between the higher, mountainous Daga elevations and the lowland Ola elevations. Most of the lands around Lake Tana fall into this middle climatic region. Whiteway, in his introduction to Castanhazo's account, discusses the evidence he was able to compile for its location. Castanhazo himself does not name the place. It was Pedro Paez who first provided the name of Wayna Daga. Paez's younger contemporary, Geronimo Lobo, locates the battle at a place called Gran High Jaaf Gran High, or Granny's Gate. Granny's Tree. Lobo was told the locale acquired this name when Imam Ahmad, finding himself mortally wounded in the battle, in great pain and rage, took the unsheathed scimitar with which he was fighting and struck a blow on the trunk of a tree near him. Lobo adds that he was shown the place, tree and mark. James Bruce, traveling south of Dengelbur over 3 centuries later, mentions passing the small village of Wayna Daga, famous for the decisive battle fought between King Claudius and the Morgraine, adding in a footnote that the village was otherwise called Granaba. However, as Whiteway points out, the difficulty that presents itself to my mind is to understand by what possible strategy one army starting from Darazgay, and the other from Wagera, neither desiring to avoid an engagement, and both starting places being north of Lake Tana. The decisive battle could have taken place at its southwest corner. Bruce may have been of the same mind, for earlier in his lengthy account of Ethiopian history, when he recounts the Battle of Wayna Daga, Bruce appears to indicate the 2 armies fought at the northeast corner of the lake. Whiteway notes that 2 explorers, Coombs and Tamesia, who crossed the mountainous country northeast of Lake Tana in 1835, called that region Wayna Daga, or Wayna Daga, and he concludes his discussion by locating the battle there. The battle. Once the Ethiopian Portuguese army found the army of Imam Ahmed, they set up camp nearby. Emperor Gelawid was advised against engaging the enemy right away, hoping that the 50 missing Portuguese soldiers would arrive soon, as, in that country 50 Portuguese are a greater reinforcement than 1,000 natives. Over the following days, each camp proceeded to harass the other with cavalry raids. The Allied side had the better of the exchange, keeping their opponents from venturing from their camp for supplies, until the Somalis managed to kill the leading Ethiopian soldier, Asmishkaflo, which demoralized the Ethiopian troops. Faced with the potential desertion of his force, Galorges decided he could wait no longer and prepared for an assault the next day. The 2 forces started the main battle early the next day, with the Somali Ottoman force divided into 2 groups. At first, the Muslim side succeeded in driving the Allied side back, until a charge by the Portuguese and Ethiopian cavalry broke up the charge. At this point Imam Ahmed ibn Ibrahim al-Ghazi, with his son at his side, took to the field and led a renewed assault. It was in this charge that the Imam was killed by a bullet to his chest which threw him from his horse, although the sources differ in how he died. According to Castanhazo, the Imam was recognized by the Portuguese arquebusiers, who directed their combined firepower at him, and one of the arquebusiers in the group fired the fatal shot. Although he was an eyewitness to the battle, Castanhazo constantly emphasizes in his account the corporate identity of the Portuguese expedition after Gama's death. We bore before us the banner of holy compassion. The Prester had sought to appoint one of us captain, but we desired none save the banner of himself to lead us, for it was not to be anticipated that we should follow another. Having lost what we had lost, there is another tradition, at least as old as João Bermudes, and repeated by every other near contemporary source, that gives the credit of Imam Ahmed's death to one João de Castillo. João charged into the Somali troops so he could fire upon Ahmed Granite, point-blank range, an audacious act resulting in his death. Both Castanhazo and the story of João de Castillo return to agreement about Imam Ahmed's fate after this point. At the end of the battle, when Emperor Galorges offered his sister's hand in marriage to the man who killed the Imam, an Ethiopian soldier presented the Imam's head as proof of the deed, but a subsequent investigation revealed that the Portuguese had wounded him before the soldier had cut off the Imam's head. Thus he did not give his sister to that man, nor did he reward the Portuguese, as it was not known who wounded him. Aftermath. As they heard of the death of the Imam, his followers fled the battlefield. Armies of that time and place tended to pledge their loyalty to a leader, not to a cause. Most of his followers pragmatically looked to their own well-being. An exception was the captain of the Ottoman arquebusiers, who, seeing that the Moors were giving way, he determined to die with bared arms. and a long broadsword in his hand. He swept a great space in front of him. He fought like a valiant cavalier, for 5 Abyssinian horsemen were on him, who could neither make him yield nor slay him. One of them attacked him with a javelin. He wrenched it from his hand. He howled another's horse, and none dared approach him. There came up a Portuguese horseman, by name Gonçalo Fernandes, who charged him spear in rest and wounded him sorely. The Turk grasped the spear, so firmly, that before he could disengage himself the Moor gave him a great cut above the knee that severed all the sinews and crippled him. Finding himself wounded, he drew his sword and killed him. Imam Ahmed's wife Bati del Wambra managed to escape with a group of the surviving Ottoman arquebusiers, 300 horsemen of her personal guard, and as much of the Imam's treasure as they could carry. The moment they left their camp, the victorious Ethiopian army poured in, slaughtering everyone they encountered except for women and children. Amongst the women were numerous Christian captives and, as Castin Hazo tells the story, some found sisters, others daughters, others their wives, and it was for them no small delight to see them delivered from captivity. According to Bruce, there remained one enemy leader, Joram, with a sizable force still at large. Joram had driven Gelawdewos from his hiding place on Mount Salem, and forced him to cross the Takaza on foot, with equal danger of being drowned or taken. Joram had been unable to join the Imam before the battle, and Emperor Gelawdewos learned he was hastening towards him, unaware that the battle had already been lost. Gelawdewos sent out a party who successfully ambushed him, which closed the account of Claudius with his father's enemies. The father of the Barnegas, who had despaired of the rightful emperor being restored to power and had come to be a valuable supporter of the Imam, sought pardon from Gelawdewos, offering Imam Ahmed's son in exchange, despite the emperor's anger at the man's betrayal. Out of respect for the Barnegas, who had provided critical help in getting the Portuguese expedition into Ethiopia, Gelawdewos consented to the offer. The Imam's son later proved a useful prize, for he was later exchanged for the emperor's own brother, Menes, who later succeeded Gelawdewos. A number of other Christians who had joined Imam Ahmed Gran accompanied the Barnegas farther into camp, but not having the influence or bargaining chip he did, the emperor ordered the execution of some of them. Other individuals who sought his safe conduct, the emperor Gelawdewos granted it, for there were so many that had he ordered all to be killed, he would have remained alone. By Easter, it became clear to Gelawdewos that he would not be able to make a circuit of his newly won empire to impress his authority on all parts of it before the start of the rainy season. So he set up camp 3 leagues away, in an unnamed location on the shores of Lake Tana. Once the rains had ended, Emperor Gelawdewos began the long task of consolidating his rule.